I never imagined the future would turn out like this. Life is really fascinating. When I was 10, my parents passed away in an accident. My dad was a fisherman of few words, and my mom had the kind heart who supported him. One night, unusually, they both went out on the boat, and it capsized. They never returned. I was just a little kid then, and I was taken in by my grandmother, Harriet, and became her adopted child. That was a date. Your mom looked forward to every anniversary that your dad would invite her for a seaside date, but who could have imagined it would come to this? Grandma spoke with a hint of loneliness in her voice. Then, with a quiet yet strong voice, she reassured me, "Don't worry, I'm here for you." That's how she encouraged me. Grandma lived alone. The house, frankly, couldn't be called pretty. It was a rundown apartment. "I'm sorry for such a modest home. We're not well off." That was often followed by an apology. But I loved living with Grandma so much that it never bothered me, and I'd say, "I don't mind at all. Please don't apologize." I always tried to respond in a way that wouldn't make her worry, and kept a smile on my face. Being poor didn't bother me. I was determined to make it through. As long as I had my dear Grandma, who was always there to encourage me, I felt like I could handle anything. I wouldn't be beaten. That alone gave me the confidence to keep living. I studied hard to make Grandma proud. Thanks to that, my grades improved rapidly, and by the time I was in the first year of middle school, I was at the top of my class. This drew a lot of attention at the school, but not everyone thought well of it. "It's Kyle from my class." "Hey, I heard you're living with your poor granny. That's why her clothes are always so tattered." "Huh?" Kyle said, and his cronies laughed uproariously. My clothes are hand-me-downs from a neighbor who graduated, and it's true that it might not be the best. But it's something my grandma got for me by humbling herself and asking for it. I couldn't stand them laughing at such a treasured clothes, yet I was too frustrated to talk back. Our house walls are thin, so I didn't want Grandma to hear me crying. When I was alone at home, I cried quietly. Keeping quiet, I feared I'd just sink into worse thoughts, so I helped my grandma more actively. Once a month, I'd take her to the seniors' meeting held nearby, or accompany her to the doctor's. She had bad legs, and having even one person for support seemed to help. She'd always say thank you, but I was too embarrassed by my adolescence. I could never respond properly, just gave a sheepish smile. But her words always lifted my spirits. Having suddenly become her adoptee, I was always worried about being a burden, so being able to help felt incredibly good. I went to a public high school because the tuition was affordable. I worked part-time at night to help with the living expenses. I'd always helped out, but being able to contribute directly to our finances eased some of my worry about being a burden. Of course, I kept up with my studies, worked hard for my university entrance exams, and got into my first choice, a national university. I received a grant scholarship, which allowed me to study without taking on debt. My friends hear a lot of bragging from me. I always tell them, my grandson is just the cutest and such a hard worker. Grandma told me this with such joy, time and time again. Knowing she praised me even when I wasn't around made me so happy that I threw myself into my university studies with even more zest. I enjoyed learning French the most. As I was thinking about what I could do something with it, the doctor we often visited at the hospital suggested if I want to do volunteering work. It was a simple gig, interpreting for those who needed it. Of course, I said yes. The days were tough, but I remember them as some of the most fulfilling ones I've had. And then, it was time for job hunting. I applied to several companies but kept getting rejected after the interviews. It was during this time, at a job fair, when I was stopped by a voice I recognized. "Hey, is that you, Charlie?" Charlie, right. I couldn't forget him. Kyle, the unpleasant guy from my elementary and middle school days, was right there in front of me. "Why are you here?" "I'm job hunting too. Came to listen in. I'm interested in this industry." "You're here to listen as well, aren't you? Well, I bet the company I land a job at will be much better. With that shabby suit you're wearing, looking like a hand-me-down, I doubt you'll get through anywhere." Kyle laughed in that same mocking way he used to. "You don't know that." I was able to talk back this time, something I couldn't do before, but he just said, "Look at you talking back. You've gotten pretty bold," and sneered sarcastically. Nothing seemed to have changed about him. As luck would have it, I kept running into Kyle at the booths thereafter. Every time was an unpleasant experience with his teasing. To think I'd still have to put up with this as an adult. As I walked home feeling frustrated, "Charlie, what's wrong? You seem down." Grandma was there to welcome me with a worried look. "No, it's nothing. Just got a bit tired from listening to all the company presentations." I managed to smile to cover it up. Then, Grandma brought out some delicious-looking dishes from the kitchen. "This is beef stew. I got it from a seniors gathering and it was so good. I wanted you to try it, so I asked for the recipe. You've always loved it since you were little. Eating something you like might cheer you up. You've been having fast food too much lately. You should have some homemade meals once in a while." She said this as she served me salad and bread too. Maybe because I've lived with Grandma, I always loved homemade cuisine. "Thank you." Today's meal looked incredibly delicious. I took my time enjoying the taste of a home-cooked meal after so long. Once I leave this house, I might not get to enjoy this kind of homemade food again. That thought crossed my mind. If I get a job, I plan to live on my own. Somehow, these ordinary days felt irreplaceable. I wondered what Grandma would do without me. Will I be comfortable on my own? Or perhaps, will she feel lonely? Her bad legs make going out a struggle, I wonder. It might even become difficult to attend the seniors club meetings she looks forward to. Various thoughts raced through my mind, and before I noticed, I was tearing up. "What's wrong? You look so tired. Are you okay?" Realizing I had caused concern, I hurriedly replied, "I'm fine now. I got to eat Grandma's cooking after a long while. It really cheered me up. There's nothing like home cooking. I've been so busy lately, often just grabbing some fast food, but I'll make sure we have meals together like this more often. Can I ask you to make stew again sometime?" Hearing this, Grandma seemed a little relieved. "Of course, nothing makes me happier than seeing you enjoy my food. Take care of yourself and keep at it." Thanks to Grandma's kindness, I felt a bit better. The job hunting continued, with interviews day in and day out, and I often bumped into Kyle. He always had something to say, but I tried my best not to let it bother me. On the day I finished an interview at my first choice company, I ran into him again. "Still haven't got an offer. That's pitiful," Kyle said with a sneer. I figured he was in the same boat with job hunting, but I didn't want to engage in a pointless argument, so I decided to just leave without a word. But Kyle seemed to enjoy provoking me and kept going. "Still living with your poor grandma, even with her around. She must not be much help, just eating up your money. That was too much for me to bear." "Cut it out. She's the one who raised me. There's no way I'd think of her like that." I raised my voice, something I rarely do, and Kyle seemed taken aback for a moment. But he didn't back down and pressed on. "Come on, admit it. Deep down you must think she's a burden." I was shaking with anger. "Well, anyway, you'll fail today's interview, and I'll pass. Your suit looks cheap, and you lack any real charm. No decent company would take you. You're better off mowing lawns. That would suit you and your poor grandma." As Kyle made his declaration, a voice suddenly challenged, "Is that really what you believe?" From behind the interview room, an elderly gentleman in a black suit emerged. He looked to be in his 70s with his gray hair. I had a feeling I'd seen him somewhere before. "Ah, you are. That's right. I remember now." That face, I've seen it on the company's website. He was the CEO of the company. I heard that whole conversation. You seem to be making quite light of the elderly lady, huh? While giving Kyle a stern look, the CEO said. No, I mean. Kyle was flustered, but the CEO didn't listen. I've heard about how Charlie has lived since he was a child. I understand he cherishes the grandmother he lives with very much, and yet, you spoke quite harshly about her. At the CEO's words, Kyle was trembling. Even with a quick glance, I could see he was sweating bullets. Curiously, I asked the CEO a question. How come you know about me? Well, I happen to know your grandmother, Harriet. I enjoy conversing with people, and often participate in the seniors' gatherings, where I became friendly with her after our chats. Who would have thought the CEO was connected to my grandma? I was totally blown away by this unexpected turn of events. I'm well aware of the support you've given to Harriet with her bad legs. She always talks about you. She talks to everyone that she's got a grandson to be proud of, who never gets discouraged despite the tough times, always has a smile on his face, takes on lots of part-time jobs to help out with her finances, and studies hard too. Is that so? I had no idea. Learning how highly my grandma spoke of me was both heartwarming and embarrassing. I almost felt like crying. Kyle, seeming out of place, didn't say a word and started to leave the scene. As for the interview results, Kyle, you're not hired. Charlie, you're hired. Kyle flinched at the CEO's voice. Does that mean it's because I badmouthed Charlie? Kyle looked like he was about to cry. It's more about the difference in skills. The universities you guys graduated from were almost at the same level. However, Charlie can speak advanced French. He even has experience as a medical interpreter, albeit as a volunteer. Our company is currently looking for someone who can do medical interpretation, and Charlie fits the bill perfectly. I was moved that the CEO knew even about the volunteering. In comparison, Kyle, it seems you have a French qualification, but that's just for tests. Do you actually speak it? We have plenty of people who speak French. Unless you have knowledge about medical or pharmaceutical stuff, to be honest, it's going to be tough. That's why, quite simply, you don't stand out. Sorry, but you'll have to look elsewhere. Having been told this straight by the CEO, Kyle slumped to the ground. Charlie, I'd really like you to shine with us. Jess, thank you so much. I felt rewarded for all my hard work and was happy. I went straight home and told my grandma. My goodness, congratulations, and to think you went for an interview at Shane's company. I'm surprised but so happy. Grandma was delighted as if it were her own joy. When I asked, it turned out she had known the CEO for a long time. I've known Shane at the Seniors Club since you started living here. We still get together to play cards, have tea, and enjoy each other's company. I knew he was a CEO but had no idea it was of such a large company. Grandma was so surprised that she said she would call the CEO. The CEO of my first choice company was an old friend of my grandma's, which felt kind of strange. After making the call and confirming it was true, she chatted for a bit and handed the phone to me before handing. Charlie, it was nice to talk with you today. Thank you too. It feels kind of strange, doesn't it? Just a moment ago, we met as the CEO and a job seeker. True. I'd like to also get along as Harriet's friend from now on. How about dinner, the three of us, sometime? I was a bit surprised by the invitation. I wondered if it would be okay to have dinner with the CEO. I was at a loss for words on how to respond when I was told, please switch with Harriet, so she took over. Upon hearing the CEO's suggestion, Grandma immediately agreed. That sounds lovely. Let's definitely have a meal together, and quickly set a date. Honestly, I was confused, but seeing how delighted Grandma was, I thought, well, why not? The following week, we had dinner as promised. It was a typical family restaurant, the kind you wouldn't expect the CEO of a big corporation to visit. Are you sure this place is okay? Maybe somewhere more upscale, or Maybe you're just being considerate of us. But the CEO shook his head. I'm a self-made man, so I prefer to live a down-to-earth life, the CEO replied with a smile. Fancy places just don't sit well with me, so I often come to this restaurant. Since I'm a regular customer, all the waitstaff know me by face. The CEO's words, spoken with a warm smile, seemed to be genuinely true. Every time the waiters came to the table, they spoke to the CEO. Watching this, I started to relax. The three of us ordered the steaks that the CEO recommended, chatting and eating until we were completely stuffed. Having the meals with the three of us turned out to be more delicious than I expected. While Grandma went to the restroom, I escorted her to the hallway. Upon returning to our table, the CEO struck up a conversation. Actually, I would like to go out with Harriet, he confessed. It may seem strange at my age, but I'm serious. I've been alone since my wife passed away 10 years ago. Embarrassingly, I'm a bit stubborn and occasionally get into arguments, but Harriet always treats me with kindness. If I've had a falling out with my friends, she mediates and helps us reconcile. I've never met anyone like her, so if I have your blessing, Charlie, like a son to me, I'd like to confess my feelings. What do you think? I smiled quietly and nodded at the nervous-looking CEO. Of course, I'm all for it. And before I could finish, we heard "So that's how it is." Turning around, Grandma was there. A staff member had brought her back to the table. I hadn't noticed at all. I wonder how much she heard. I would be so happy to be with you, and Charlie agrees. Please take care of me. With those words, Grandma was in tears. Though they never officially married, they've been living together. Their home is surprisingly modest for CEOs, but seeing Grandma so happy makes me very glad. We still frequently go to that family restaurant for meals. My job is going well too, as a corporate interpreter. I'm heading off to another day at the job, and seeing Grandma's happy face motivates me to keep up the good work.